Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Sit back and listen to interviews, discussion about books, and anything else literary. There's always something or someone new on the show. Good evening, listeners. I'm Amy, and welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Today we are joined by an author. Please introduce yourself and let the audience know how they can connect with you.
Hello, I'm Talia Haven, and you can find me on Facebook. Today, we're switching it up, and we're going to have some fun. I've been introduced at least 2 times by Amy, and I got talking with her about nonfiction. Now, for the record, I've never written a nonfiction book, but Amy has. Today, we are going to be talking about Ballstown. Welcome, Amy, to your podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
My main question is, when you started to write Ballstown, what was it? Was it a historical figure? Was it something that happened in history? Was it pre-colonial times where you were involved with a war? What exactly was it?
It was actually, unfortunately, there was land that was Native American land. And there's a lake, it's now called Ballston Lake, but it was called Long Lake, and there was these 2 men, brothers, the McDonalds, and they were squatting on, land, and then the government came in and, told the Native Americans to move on, and then, people started hearing about these mineral springs. I live in Ballston Spa and Saratoga Springs. Between the 2 towns, they have mineral springs. If you like mineral water, you'd love this. To me, I don't like it. It's gross. But anyway, so what was happening was that like the Native Americans would use the water, and some of it they were using for medicinal purposes. When word got around, and this is the 1800s, so word is you run into somebody, passing wagon, and you talk. There was no phone or electricity or Facebook for that matter. And so people started coming around, and they would stay in neighboring towns where there was actually places that they could stay, or they would camp on public land, and they would go visit the springs. Then this man, his name was Reverend Eliaphilet Ball. And he was, just by going through anything that I could find on him, I see him as a Renaissance man, because he was a reverend, but what he wanted to do is he wanted to create a place where, people could settle, and then, a church and things like that. And by this time, there were people wanting, settlers and pioneers coming. A lot of them were from his original, Reverend Ball's original congregation, and they came forward. And then, Reverend Ball, talked to the McDonald brothers and said, all right, I'll give you 10 shillings for this land. And it was this whole huge, it's miles of land. And, they're like, oh, okay. And 10 shillings was, a lot of people, misunderstand, and they said that he bought it with a bottle of rum. And actually it wasn't that he paid for it with a bottle of rum. It's just that a bottle of rum at the time was 10 shillings.
Oh.
Yeah. So, yeah, I found that was, quite interesting. It's funny how when I was going through a lot of the, records that I could find, and I was able to locate books that were printed. Balsafar, well, it has its own newspaper, but, it started out, as a printing press, in the early 1800s, um, and they published a lot of books and printed things and all that kind of stuff. But, the research was fun. When he bought the town, and it was probably around, I'm just guessing, was about 20 miles of, circumference, of what he bought. And they named it Ball's Town, because, he basically was creating this town. He wanted a place where people, could settle down. He had a church built. Actually, the church that he built was in the late 90s, had burned down, but the fire somehow preserved the original steeple. And the original steeple for that church was when they built this church. That was, and it's still there. They use it. When they rebuilt the church, they put the steeple back on, and for some reason that steeple was left without any damage at all, which was pretty amazing. So, but I find that I really got into it. I was writing a short story, and it was a paranormal book, and I thought, I've never written a story where my hometown was the setting. I always either made one up or was in a different city or whatever. So in doing that, I had, my main character, who I named after my late grandmother, kind of an homage to her. And, the character she was a historian, but she also could speak and hear, the dead, if they wanted to talk to her. And so in doing research for that, because her house is in the middle of the cemetery that was built, and that in getting all the information that's accurate, turns out they were trying to solve a 200-year-old missing persons case, and not to give it away, but they did, in unique fashion, I should say. But with that, I was like, I just do. I've always loved history. And so I took some of the research that I had used for the other book, and then I started really diving into, see what I could find about, because there's rumors, excuse me. People go, they talk about things. There's a landmark actually in Balsam that states that one of the generals that was in the Revolutionary War invented baseball, which is not true. It was a rumor, and somebody thought, oh yeah, it's truth. So I had to weed out a lot of innuendo and rumor, and then see what I could actually prove.
What was the name of the short story that you wrote, and is it available for people to pick up?
Yeah, it's called The Forsaken, and it's available on Amazon.
Excellent.
Yeah, I really loved putting together that book, and that inspired me. I love it when my own work inspires me, but like I said, I love history, and I mean, I'm working on currently my own family's history, and on both sides, of my family, my dad's side and my mother's side. My mother passed away a long time ago. My dad is on his way out, because he has dementia, and it's just progressing, so it could,
I'm very sorry to hear about that. In your family history that you're working on now, is there anything really interesting in there that'll spark another short story like this one did, The Forsaken?
it may. I mean, I solved an 84-year-old family secret mystery.
Oh, do tell.
Oh, yeah, I was doing research on my mom's side of the family, and one of her sisters, that it's just, she found out, she didn't know she had this sister until the early 80s, and because it was not talked about. And I talked to my aunt, and asked her some questions, and then I was doing some research, and then I decided to ask my cousin, who I thought he was my cousin by marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that, I did one of those ancestry DNA tests. I was curious about my lineage and things like that, on both sides. And my DNA linked to my cousin's mother. And all I knew was that his mother married one of our relatives. So it should not have been a match at all,
Right.
because it was through marriage. And so I started digging, and then I contacted my cousin Matt, and I'm like asking questions about his mom, and she's older, so I didn't want to, get her going, and get her upset or anything. So I told him what I found, and I asked him some questions, and then as we were talking and the information was coming out, and he's like, I think that she is a sister of your Aunt Rose. And I'm like, well, that meant she would have been my mother's half sister. So we would have been, and we are, blood relatives. So,
Interesting.
yeah, so then
So
when
now that we're on the topic of new technology and stuff, how do you feel about AI and even the DNA genetic thing of being used to work with nonfiction? I mean, would you trust anything new that you would research on the internet as possibly AI and totally false? How do you weed that out? Do you have any, or is it so new that it's something that you're still working on or trying to determine what is actually true and what actually isn't?
well, I use AI a little bit, for ideas when I'm working on my graphic designs. I use part of it, but I make it enough because, there's a rule that, and I wouldn't want just an AI photo, but of how the graphic is yours, even if you had AI help with creating it. You have to do more to the graphic than just change colors and position. So I did that research, and I don't. Sometimes I also work. I use Copilot, and she just helps me come. She's like my friend. She helps me come up with some ideas. But when I'm doing research, I don't rely on, what comes out when I say do a Google search, and then, they have their AI giving all this information. Because now when I ask questions, and the answers I'm getting are from my own book.
Oh, excellent. You're out there.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay.
So every town has their own historical museums and their own historical societies. How much did you talk to them or even depend on them to get maybe photos that you could use or old written letters?
But, well, we do have it's the Saratoga County Historical Society, and then there's a derivative of that, that might be the wrong word. It's called Saratoga County, Historical Roundtable. And when I had questions about, like, I wanted to confirm some information I found, I emailed the society, and they gave me some information and some leads. They also gave me, credible, websites that I could go to find stuff. And some of them I had already known about. And so after everything got published, but there was also a Facebook group, a couple of them. They're like, if you live in Ballston Spa, you'll know this or remember this. And I contacted the main contributor of the group, and because he would post photos, and asked him, if I could use them, or where he found them and things like that. Because I didn't want to take someone else's. I want to make sure that I get the right. I'm not using something that's copyrighted for somebody else. So
Right.
and
So I know that you're talking about doing a project about your family. Do you have any other new projects that are in the works?
well, my family one is ongoing. Seems every time I think I'm close to the end, there's more branches from the tree. In the 1600s right now, so I have some, and I have some information on some people that from the 1500s. So I just haven't gotten there to that point to where I'm investigating that. But recently, I had an article published by the Saratoga County Historical Society, and with them doing that, I became an official local historian.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was like, it was such an honor to do that, and I was so excited. And recently, since my dad has started to progress, I got in contact with, or he contacted me, with my dad's cousin, and he is a local historian. He says he's retiring, but we'll see, for a different county. And we got to talking, and now we share family information. When I told him, he read my article, and he said that it was very impressive, so that made me extremely happy. And then he even dropped a name to give me an idea for a new article, which I wrote. So that's supposed to come out sometime in November. And then I was like, I've been wanting to do this project where I write about people, like pioneers and settlers around the town, especially ones that people don't know about. When I wrote my first book, Ballstown, there was a woman who impressed me so much. Her story did. So I had written an article, and I was going to put it in a book, and then it never went anywhere. But I ended up creating the article for the Historical Society that I wrote about her. And what I found was so interesting was that if I Googled her name, before I wrote the article, it was like nothing. Her mother's name would come up because her mother was instrumental in creating schools that were for women, and so they could get a comparable education to males, not just like learn how to sew and be a good housewife. And she wanted that for her daughter. And when she got older and got married and she had children, she convinced her husband to open the first female school in Ballston Spa, and it was open for a couple of years in the the early 1800s. And yeah, Ballston Spa was incorporated in 1807. And that's when it became like a village, but we have all these towns all around it. And I was glad that I got to tell her story because she wasn't just a mother. She was a woman who was never given credit for the ideas because back then she couldn't put a school in her name. She couldn't, go to the Board of Education and say, I want to do this. And when they did an article on her, on the school, they never mentioned her, only her husband. And now when you Google her name, which is Lucretia Booth, you get all my articles that wherever the article is published, and people can get information about her. And it was like, was just drawn to her and her story. And then when I started, my new book and I'm doing, the research for it, it's individuals that people may not even know about, unless they're told. Some people stand out more because they were success stories, or they're, familiar, because they're like, they ended up becoming famous or very successful, or they ended up being a congressman or a judge. I just did an article that there was a law school in Ballston Spa for 3 years. And Chester A. Arthur, our former president, was actually a student there.
Interesting.
Yeah. I find so much interesting tidbits when I do this, and I love it. And of course, there's a point where you have to stop. And then also, I get frustrated when I can't find anything. I have websites where I can search newspaper archives and find articles from 1700s, 1800s, whenever certain places were doing printing. I was able to track down a digital copy of all the books that were ever printed out of the original printing press. My sister had found some old documents in her house because her house is a historical house. Her land is historical, part of history. A famous judge lived there, and so she let me use some of her books, and I transcribed them the best I could for her. But it's, I think more people, they took some time to be, in learning about where they came from, especially their hometown. And some people just take for granted that it's there as if it's always been there. And they forget about certain people. But Ballston Spa was there was, in the Revolutionary War, George Washington, General Washington at the time, marched up this road called Middle Line Road. And at the time it was named that because it was right in the middle of Ballstown. It was like the center of it. And they made their way up on foot to where they were going to start the Battle of Saratoga. There was 2 of them. And there was even a fort in Ballston. They created, and Reverend Ball, he created that, and he also joined the army as not just, it was kind of like a consultant. He gave spiritual guidance to soldiers, but he also he was very smart. And he knew his land, and he was able to create, work with generals on their plans and, for attack, because it wasn't just the British that, they were fighting. It was, and traders that lived within our town, which they called Tories, but also, the Iroquois, who seeked, an alliance with the British, but that was just because of their hatred for the white men, so they wanted excuses to go in and murder people.
Fort still a historical site in your town? Or is it something that over time has just been gone?
Actually, there's a lot of landmarks on that road, because it was also, where we had our first courthouse, our first prison, and they tried to, a lot of the lawyers built their house on that road because they wanted to be able to be close to the courthouse and things like that. So yeah, there are a lot of even hidden signs. Like now, sometimes they're hidden behind a tree, but they're official landmarks. So, and I'm looking forward to seeing more what I can find, because before I did it and it was just about like everything. And now I'm focused on individual people right now, for the book that I'm working on, and maybe people will learn something.
I want to thank you for your time very, very much. You've been very insightful, and if I ever decide to get into writing nonfiction, I've kind of got some good direction on where to go, and I thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if you wish for you or your book to be on the show, go to amysbookshelfreviews.com/podcast. Thank you for listening. Be safe, be well, and always be kind. Tune in here again next week for another tantalizing discussion. Thank you for listening to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast.